the Funny Comics Fan Club.
Hello, and welcome to the Funny Comics Fan Club with me, Dr. Mark Hibbett.
And me, not Dr. John Dredge.
He's not a doctor.
I'm definitely not.
Definitely not. So what we're doing is, the Funny Comics Fan Club is a podcast in which we look at a specific issue of a funny comic. And what comic, John, are we looking at today?
We are looking at the governor of comics, in my opinion. We are looking at Krazy Comic. 8p every Monday, bear that in mind. 26th of November 1977 is the issue we're looking at if you want to read along at home.
Krazy Comic started in October 1976. Its last issue was in April 1978. So this is 2/3 of the way through the run. Maybe it's in its pulp at this point.
This was the glory years of Krazy Comic, even though there were only two of them.
There are only two of them, yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? I think the fact is, I think Krazy Comic has such a big legacy to people of our age that we remember it very, very fondly. I think lots of people remember it really fondly because it's great, but it was hardly here at all.
I mean, I think I pretty much bought every issue of this thing. This is a particularly special issue to me, which we will get to that later. But let's look at the cover, actually. The covers were sort of unconventional and inventive. Every cover was like really startling. And the cover of this one, you've got a parachutist crashing through the roof of a shop and just saying, "Just dropped in for my Krazy." So he's picked up the Krazy comic that he's in, that's on the counter in this shop. And they always used to do this trick that used to fascinate me as a kid. They would have a picture of the comic that you were going to read on the front of the comic that you were going to read. And, you know, the image would sort of disappear into the distance. That was on almost every one. I used to love that.
And it's amazing that the guy, he's dropped into the newsagent shop and there's a proper old-fashioned newsagent in a white newsagent's coat there. And he thought, yeah, did newsagents used to wear, did they wear like white gowns like doctors? Were they a doctor of fun?
No, I think, but it's like a shorthand, it's a comic shorthand for a newsagent. But yeah, it's a traditional looking newsagent and a traditional looking parachutist. Looks like he's come out of World War II or something.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
He's got this World War II moustache. But it's an arresting image.
It is, and it's like, if you will, how about this? This is using traditional things, a traditional newsagent, a traditional RAF in a completely untraditional way, which really, so a lot of what Krazy's about, isn't it?
It is. And this could have been, I mean, this hasn't dated, actually, this drawing, to me. And a lot of the material inside hasn't dated. A lot of this could have been done yesterday, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let's have a look at the first one then.
So the first one, the first comic strip is called Hello, It's Cheeky, and it features the star of the comic, really. The name, Cheeky. He was a big star in Krazy Comic.
It's fantastic, isn't it? And what happens in this strip is, the same as happens in each week, Cheeky sort of walks through the streets, bumping into people and household objects, as we'll see, and he interacts. I mean, it's like Rhoda Martin's laughing. He meets somebody, they have a humorous exchange, and then he moves on to the next person. And he must have taken an awful lot of work to work in all these gags, to have to keep thinking. Because when we looked at like Nutty, for instance,
which was
not like this.
It wasn't nutty at all.
It was hard pressed to find a joke in the whole thing.
You're right, but this is full of jokes.
Full of gags.
The characters are quite surreal as well. Like a knock-knock door turns up and Cheeky has to tell a knock-knock joke and then it goes away. And then you've got a posh school kid called Posh Claude. These are characters that you can just understand straight away. You've got a bloke who comes up through a manhole every week and tells a joke. It's all good fun, isn't it, really?
Yes. And I noticed here there's a soppy Louise. So Louise is a girl who wants to be Cheeky's girlfriend. And Cheeky tries to hide behind the actual panel of the comic. He peels that away.
He rolls it up. He's trying to roll up the picture itself.
And he says, "Oh no, Louise. She sticks to me like Starsky's rabbit to his hutch."
There are three mentions.
Of
Starsky and Hutch. That's how big they were in 1977. And there's all sorts of interesting background details. Like there's a boy who's floating in the air in the background here. He's got a massive bubble from bubblegum sticking in his mouth. And that was a running gag. So very inventive and very jokey. And Cheeky got his own comic.
Yeah, and a lot of these characters that you meet got their own strips in Cheeky Comic.
because there was something to them.
Yeah, and Cheeky runs throughout, doesn't he? Because I think when you get later on in the comic, there's Cheeky's teacher is here, and Cheeky's teacher has his whole own strip, which is weird to have in a kid's comic, to have a teacher having a comic strip all of his own. And he's not the bad guy. He's like
no, he's like quite a sympathetic character.
He is, and he's not like teachers in other strips. Because whereas other teachers in other strips have a cane or they have a mortarboard and they're awful, he's quite groovy. He's like the teachers that we used to have as kids, isn't he?
Yeah, he's quite fun, and he does things like there's one panel where he's reading a book called "Teach Yourself Teaching" because he can't deal with Cheeky at all and the rest of the class. So yeah, we would have been able to relate to this. There's a really good character that was a dinner lady who's always making horrible meals. Kids love all that, don't they?
I'd say my favourite character in this, and really an icon in my life, an inspiration to me, is a character called Walter Works. And the comedy here is that Walter Works is a character who needs to wee all the time.
He goes to the toilet quite a lot, and that is his character.
That's his character. So, for instance, teacher says, "Now where are we? Ah, yes. Who can tell me the name of a famous Red Indian chief?" And Cheeky says,
"Big Chief Running Water."
And Walter Works goes, "Oh, excuse me, going away, ooh." And that's kind of my life.
And yeah, he used to do that every week pretty much.
I'll do it halfway through this podcast, I think.
But Cheeky was a good fun character.
It was. But this joke, having somebody who needs a wee, at the time when I was reading Cheeky as a kid, just seemed mind-blowing that this could be in a comic. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. Amazing stuff.
Then we come to Paws, who is a dog. And this strip isn't particularly inventive to me. A fairly standard story about a dog.
It is. I mean, it's so standard that there's basically the same story drawn by the same artist, but with a cat instead, was called Claws, and that was in Whoopee comic. So that's how standard it is. It was almost literally in another comic. And I think there's a few like this, isn't there? I think, can we look at Dick Turpin Duck Turpin.
Duck Turpin, the famous duck highwayman, or highway duck, I suppose.
He's a highway duck, and he decides to stop being a highway duck and become a pirate duck instead. And it's not a great story. It's quite a normal story, but it looks so good. There's a panel here where Duck Turpin is on a boat, and there's a brilliant illustration of the deck of a boat, and he's flying, and it just looks gorgeous. And you think, so much effort with a lot of these comics, so much effort has gone into drawing them. Very little effort seems to have gone into the writing of them.
Certainly in the Duck Turpin and the Paws pages.
Yeah.
I mean, and they don't really seem to have much variety in the words they use when they get hit by things. I mean, Duck Turpin says "gun" twice in this. Gun. 2 guns. Yeah. Once where he smashes down on the floor. Gun with several N's. G-N-N-N-N-N. And another one where an anchor falls on his head. Gun. So very little variety in the expressions here, I feel.
Is that true to ducks or highwaymen in any way? Did one or both of them say gun on a regular basis?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
We'll have to investigate that further. If you, listeners,
if you know about ducks and highwaymen, then write in now.
Here's our address.
DREDGEHIBBETT@gmail.com.
But we come to praise Krazy, not bury it.
We do.
Because look at this next page.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's so good.
It's all red.
It is all red. Yes.
Now this is called Pongo Pongo, and it features that grotty, stinky, but memorable character, Pongo Snodgrass.
What an amazing name. Pongo Snodgrass. But we should say, I think, just to make clear, for people who have never seen Krazy Comic or don't remember, when John says this is all red, he obviously means that we've read it, clearly, that's one way, but also it's printed entirely in red ink. It's not printed in black and red like Minnie the Minx was or other comics like that. It's just red.
It sort of works here, I think. It stands out, doesn't it? I don't know.
It does stand out. It feels to me as if I've got one eye closed and I'm looking at a 3D picture.
It's a little bit experimental. I think they experimented with the form quite a lot in Krazy Comic. It was a very inventive and creative comic, unlike Nutty. But Pongo Pongo is more like an advice column. It's not a story. It's 2 pages of Pongo telling you how to do things that involve being smelly, really. What a great idea. So you've got something called Fun with Bubblegum. You've got a feature called Sneaky Tricks, how to play tricks on people. And finally, you've got Niff of the Week, the Horn Hammer. This Niff really makes people notice you. So there's 3 little advice pieces here.
And he's he's weirdly lovable, isn't
He
he?
is,
I mean,
he is.
Really,
You like him because he's awful.
he is awful, and nobody else likes him.
Nobody in the comic likes him
And
at all.
it's almost like he doesn't. I don't know if he doesn't notice or he doesn't. It just doesn't seem to get to him.
He doesn't care.
It doesn't seem to get.
He's really self-possessed.
I love the Fun with Bubblegum one because it's a great wheeze where you put a stinky, horrible old bit of bubblegum in the bottom of a stinky, horrible waste paper basket. Then, in hearing of your mother, you say, I'm going to eat that stinky bit of bubblegum. And because you're disgusting, your mother thinks you're going to do that and she gives you money for more bubblegum.
What a great prank to play.
And a great prank. It does basically involve years of preparation being disgusting and eating horrible things, but it's brilliant.
And there's an appearance of a park keeper at the end of that strip, or as we like to call them in comics, a parky.
A parky?
A parky. But it's good fun and tells you how to make terrible smells and how to play tricks and what to do with bubblegum. So what else do you want? It's drawn by Ian Knox, who is pretty great.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah.
I always remember, one thing I always remember about Pongo Snodgrass is he'd always have snot dripping out of his nose. It was so, what's the word for it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you know what we mean, listeners? Write in and tell us.
We'd like to meet somebody who does. Naughty. It just seems
Yeah,
naughty.
it
doesn't
is,
when you
it
do
is.
But it's gorgeous stuff, this.
It's like you're experiencing these things vicariously.
Vicariously.
I think we used that word in the last podcast, and I don't think I've used it since. I think I can safely say that. Vicariously, ladies and gentlemen. That's the standard of English we like to use. Pongo Pongo was great. Then you turn over and you've got Krazy Dictionary, and I used to love jokes about silly definitions when I was a kid. For example, boomerang, an explosive cake. Lunatic, a watch worn in outer space.
It's like the Thanasaurus in Viz,
The clean version.
a somewhat cleaner version, yes, and several years beforehand.
But it's really manic. It's zany. That's what this comic is. You could even call it crazy. Out of push. But then there's another really great feature called Custard Pie Corner. And it says at the bottom of the page, with the help of our artist, we can hand out custard pie clobberings. You can suggest someone, just send us a photograph and a good reason why he or she deserves a pictorial pasting. If you nominate someone famous, we'll supply the picture. So you send in a picture of your brother or your aunt, or you suggest somebody famous, who in this comics is Joanna Lumley from the New Avengers, and you nominate them and you say why you want them to have a custard pie, and then the cartoonist draws a custard pie over the photograph, and it looks brilliant. We'll have to maybe put a picture on the Twitter feed for this.
And I think at this point I would like to introduce some educational content.
Go on then.
Because, like, you know, when we did Whoopee, we talked about Umbongo Eco, our philosopher pal.
The famous semiologist.
That's the fella. Well, this time I'd like to introduce the concept of the production of culture approach.
Would you?
I'm gonna.
Oh, all right then.
The production of culture
Sounds
approach.
ambitious.
See how
Go on
it
then.
goes.
Go on then.
Go on then.
Off you go.
So the production of culture approach is the idea that all cultural items are a result of the means of production. So, for instance, in the late 80s, comics started to become, I'm doing quotes marks, mature. And the idea was comics aren't just for kids anymore, anybody can read them. And the idea of the production of culture approach is that wasn't because suddenly people were writing much better comics, because by and large they weren't. It was because the paper that it was printed on was better. And so people then went, oh great, so I can buy a comic and I won't look like I bought a tatty newsprint comic like the one that we're reading here. I'm reading something that's refined. And then artists and writers would then say, well, people who are adults are buying this now, so we can actually make comics that are slightly more expensive. So it's the production methods that are leading things.
But what's that got to do with Krazy Comic?
What's that got to do with Krazy Comic? That's an excellent question, John. I'm glad you've stopped me from going off.
Yeah. That was 5 minutes of irrelevance, as far as I can say. Well, no, what's it? What? How does that link to Krazy Comic?
The relevance here is that Krazy Comic is one of the things that's so experimental about Krazy Comic is it's printed on much nicer. It's nicer paper.
Is it really?
Well,
if you
look at the print, the printing is nice. The colours on the front page go right to the edges. They haven't got a white border around because they can go right to the edges. And you look at a lot of the pages, it's going right to the edges. There's no bleed here, and the printing quality is a lot better. When we look at some of the things, it's like the photographs actually look like photographs. I think it's important here because they can reproduce a photograph at almost photographic quality. That means they can do what they do here on Custard Pie Corner and manipulate photographs and draw things on top of them.
Okay.
That was worth knowing.
Right then.
Did you enjoy that?
Well, moving on to the next page. Yeah, I mean, they used to play with print itself.
Yeah.
Krazy Comic. Like in the early issue, there was one issue where you had to there was something like there was a racetrack. There were two drawings of a racetrack. One was white and one was black, and it said something like, "Draw your finger down the white racetrack, and then draw your finger down the black racetrack. What do you find?" And the answer is you get smudges on your finger. And I remember thinking, that just totally blew my mind. That the way that they used the format itself to make a joke.
That's fabulous, isn't it?
When you're 7, it's pretty mind blowing, as I was. But Custard Pie Corner says what it does on the tin. You send in a picture of your brother or your aunt or Joanna Lumley or whoever you don't like, and they'll throw a custard pie in their face. Brilliant. What more could you want at the age of 7?
And what is this? How is this related to the Phantom Flan Flinger of Tiswas fame?
Well, Tiswas was up and running, but it wasn't in London regions as yet. At first I thought it might have been a reflection of that sort of thing. But Tiswas wasn't on in the London regions till, I think, a year after this. So, but it may have been in the air. Custard pies were in the air. Obviously, at that point. I mean, Crackerjack was on, and that was very messy, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So, and kids love custard pies.
Kids do love custard pies. And Bugsy Malone might have been around the same time,
Yeah,
mightn't it?
yeah.
Custard pies were in the air.
What a good song that was. And turning the page, now we've got a text story that I never used to bother with because it was all text and it used to look a bit intimidating.
It does look intimidating, doesn't it? It's in a fairly standard grown-up newspaper
Style, yeah.
font, isn't it?
It's just a page story, Detective Fumbly's nutcase book. I mean, when I read it recently, well, the other day.
Recently?
Yeah. I must admit, I haven't read this for a while.
I happened to be in my library and came across this.
I was reading the Krazy Comic collection the other day, and I read the Detective Fumbly story, and it is pretty funny.
It is funny, yeah.
It is sort of funny, but it's not outstandingly silly.
No, and it seems odd that Krazy Comic, which was so experimental and so crazy and forward-looking, went back to something that hadn't really been in British kids' comics for several years of having a text story.
Yeah. I never read them at the time, but it's worth trying, wasn't it? They're obviously trying different ideas and different styles and things. Moving on, okay. So in this podcast, we choose 2 stories that we like and 1 that we don't like. That's what we do. But I couldn't find any that I didn't like. So the one thing in this edition of Krazy that I do not like is not a story. It's an advertisement. It's an advertisement for Carol and her knit stitcher. Let's have a look at what they're advertising here. Carol, and as I say, her knit stitcher. She makes presents that are fun to knit, fun to give. Really. Christmas time is party time for Carol, and she's going to surprise her friends, not half, with beautiful presents she made herself as a warning. With her knit stitcher. Knitting's so easy with knit stitcher. See how Carol does it. She winds up the wool. You swine wool. Ties it to a special panel, and hey presto, she's knit stitching. And her kit has enough accessories to make all these super presents. She made Lucy a bag.
Now I can keep everything in one place.
A red headband for Jane.
Say, it looks super with my long hair.
And a mascot for John.
Thanks, Carol. I'll add it to my collection.
She still had enough to make special presents for Mum and Dad. Happy Christmas, Mum and Dad.
What a lovely coloured purse.
And now I won't keep losing my keys. There's loads of exciting things to make with Knit Stitcher. Get your Knit Stitcher now from Palitoy. It didn't take off. I think we can safely say the Knit Stitcher from Palitoy was not a big success. It did not take off in any way. We see illustrated in this advertisement the various so-called presents that Carol made for a long-suffering family, I think there must be. She made this mascot for John, which I can honestly say is one of the most frightening things I think I've ever seen that's been made out of wool.
It's hideous. It kind of looks like a dead bird.
It literally is not something you'd want to add to your collection, John. I'm sorry.
And if John has a collection of these vile things,
You wouldn't want to be anywhere near him. She made all these rubbish presents for a family with this stupid knit stitcher. I mean, the parents look quite pleased, but it is an advert.
it is. It's
Happy Christmas. What a lovely keychain that you've made out of some knitting.
Yeah, a woolly keychain.
Well done. Thank you for my red headband that I made in about 5 minutes. It looks exactly the same as the keychain.
So I think basically you can make a bag, a strip, or a nightmarish creature from beyond hell.
Yeah, you can make all these different presents for your family.
Presents for your family.
Thanks to the knit stitcher.
From Palatoy.
So that's what I don't like in this comic. Carol and her knit stitcher from Palatoy. I'm sorry, call me old-fashioned. I could not find it on the internet anywhere. No one has ever heard of the knit stitcher, and no one's ever likely to, unless they listen to this podcast.
I think perhaps what happened is all these parents, brothers and sisters gathered together all the knit stitches and burnt them in a pyre.
In a horrible pile of horrible mascots. But thank you, Palatoy. We don't think. And the next page is interesting.
What's this on the next page, John? This looks amazing.
Well, this is why I chose this particular edition of Krazy from 26th of November 1977 when I was 7 years old. It's a Get Out of This competition, and I was one of the winners in this. This was my earliest mention in any form of media, I think I can safely say.
Your first professional work.
My first professional appearance in print. John Dredge from Penn. I used to live in Bucks.
Not Pennsylvania, America.
Not Pennsylvania, that was a long way away from on the bus. But yeah, so the idea of Get Out of This was they had a competition the week before where they showed you a situation and you had to get the person out of that tricky situation. It was a Get Out of This, you see. So we've got 5 winners here. The situation they posed was a man being chased by a bull. He's in a football field and there are some goalposts in front of him. Get out of that. One solution was the man picked up the goalposts and ran at the bull, chasing him away. That was from Paul Meller of Sheffield. Well done, Paul. Another one the whole thing turned out to be a TV programme, and a director shouts, "Cut!" There was no danger. Well done, Brian McGeeney of Black Rock. And my contribution was the man holds up a mouse and the bull screams in terror, because as we all know, bulls are scared of mice.
That's the main thing we know about bulls, isn't it?
That is the one thing, certainly at 7, that I knew about bulls. They are scared of mice. It got printed, it got published. It's not a very good joke. I don't know why, but maybe they only had 5 people that wrote in.
I have questions. So, did you write in a script for this, or did you draw it? How did that work?
I attempted to draw it, but I think I labelled everything. So, it's such a bad drawing, so everyone knew what the hell it was. I think I put bull, arrow, arrow man, arrow mouse.
That makes sense. That's really good.
So then they got a professional illustrator to draw it, and they drew it brilliantly, as far as I could see, and made me look good in 1977.
It does look good. Some of your best work, I think.
It is.
As a follower of your craft.
I think it certainly is one of the best things I ever did, which doesn't say very much.
And how did you get this £2? Was it a cheque? How did that arrive?
I'm afraid it wasn't a cheque. Disappointingly, it was a postal order. And postal orders were only ever given out by comic competitions. I think I had to explain what it was to the bank. So, postal orders, I think they were going out in 1977. Whether they ever came in, I couldn't tell you. But it was amazing to be in. And I got a letter from the editor saying, "Congratulations, you got, £2. Brilliant." So it's all been downhill really since then.
It has rather, hasn't it? Yeah.
And this is a great page of the comic, because after this momentous winnings...
Can I just say, I think maybe we could use this as an audience participation opportunity.
Audience participation opportunity. That's the jingle for that.
So I think what we'll do is we'll put the first panel up on one of our many social media channels.
The situation.
And then we'll challenge you, the reader,
to get out of that.
Get out of it. Can you beat John? Can you draw a better response to this than John managed
In 1977.
In 1977.
Here's a clue. Yes, you can.
You probably can. If you can, you can either write to us with a description or a badly drawn image of it, properly labelled, to our email address, which is dredgehibbett@gmail.com.
DREDGEHIBBETT@gmail.com.
Or don't. It's entirely up to you, isn't it? Really?
It is.
It's
That's
entirely
fair.
up to you. But this is an audience involvement opportunity. It's up to you what you make of it, ladies and gentlemen, readers, listeners, whoever you are.
That's beautiful. I think we're really moving the genre forward.
We're moving the whole podcast genre forward. Advertisement. Build your own village. Have fun making each building. Have more fun using your complete village for games with your other toys. 6 different models to build. Cottage, church, shop, pub, garage, windmill. That's one of my favourite bands, that is. Cottage, church, shop, pub, garage and windmill. Each kit complete with wood splints, sandpaper, glue, a special wood cutting tool, instructions and a super plan. It'll help you work out what the hell it is you're meant to be doing. But you can also add your own ideas. And you can colour your buildings any way you like. So it really is your own village. You'll enjoy making your woodcraft buildings. And you'll enjoy the games you think of with your woodcraft village. Quite a lot of pressure on the owner here, isn't it? So get your first woodcraft village kit today from your toy shop.
Bryden May's Woodcraft Village series.
Whatever the hell it is.
It's Brighton May, the match. People who make matches.
Is it? It's a match village.
It's a yeah. So, which must be great because when you're sick to death of the bloody thing, you can just set fire to it.
Yeah. Fun for all the family. This is a great page of this comic though, because on the second half of the page it's got the best thing in the whole comic as far as I'm concerned.
It's amazing.
The crazy shaded drawing. It says, shade in each dotted area and you will end up with a symbolic view of very recent events in British history. Will the finished picture help you name it? And then you've got a picture, quite obviously, of Chris Bonington conquering Everest and putting a flag in the summit. And it's all cut up, the image is all cut up, and there are dotted areas. And you're going to shade them in. But the thing about it is, when you look closely, you see that every area has got a dot in it. So it says, you will end up with a symbolic view of very recent events in British history. What is the answer? What is it a symbolic view of? The power cuts of November 1977. Which is a great joke. Do you remember the power cuts of 1977?
Yes, I do.
So what happened when that...
I remember there were loads of power cuts all through the 70s, weren't there? I do remember those happening. And I think that's amazing that, well, for one thing, that's a joke that would normally be a joke for adults.
Yeah.
That is told to kids.
We might have to put that on the Twitter feed as well, because it's hard to explain it. It's obvious what it is when you see it.
It's wonderful, though. It's such a funny joke.
It's a great joke. It's the best joke of the comic.
It is.
It's like Monty Python or something. Monty Python way of thinking.
It's part of the whole crazy thing, where the jokes, there's such quality jokes all the way through, and there are different kind of jokes. And this is why I think I would like to give my, having perhaps floundered somewhat with my attempts to bring the production of culture approach into this podcast.
Only somewhat.
Only somewhat. I would like to bring in a transnational comparison here.
Oh no.
Reader's voice.
Oh no, it's Dr. Mark Hibbett. That's one of our comic strips. When we do our comic, that'll be one of our strips. Go on then.
Go on then.
Off you go.
So I think the comparison...
Starting now.
The comparison is that this is like Mad Comic. It's like a British version of Mad Comic. Because
I'm not sure it is, but you carry on.
I'm sure it is.
This is your view.
This is my view, and this is like Mad Comic because it has a mixture of features, one-off comics. The printing's nice. There's an attitude of not talking down to children.
I mean, Mad Comic wasn't for children. Mad Magazine wasn't for children.
Well, I don't know.
It was more for teenagers, maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
This was a younger readership, I would say.
You're probably right.
But it's still funny now. That's the weird thing about it.
It is, but it's like it's not like when we were reading Nutty or even some Express Sabina where they're going, we'll just keep repeating the same thing. There's invention, there's effort have gone into it. And as I was musing upon this the other day, it kind of struck me. I thought, can we say that Krazy's like mad? And I went, hang on a minute, crazy, mad. Those are synonyms. Maybe it was intentional. When I.P. Thompson set down to make this revolutionary and exciting comic, they said to themselves, well, let's make it like mad. We'll call it Krazy. Because John was about to interrupt and say, no. At that point,
no.
Because there was an American comic that was a rip-off of Mad that was called Krazy.
That's right.
With a C.
Yeah. But my argument is that Mad is very American and Krazy is very British. So, was there any particular page that you thought, oh yeah, that's definitely a Mad influenced?
John, there is. There is. Thank you for asking.
Is there something to you that looks really Mad influenced?
There's one. The one that really looks Mad influenced is A Krazy Look at TV, and what they do here is they would take a current TV program and make fun of it. And here they make fun of Starsky and Hutch, our second appearance by Starsky and Hutch.
There are 3 appearances of Starsky and Hutch in this one comic. That shows you.
Can you spot them all?
Yeah. Win a £2 postal order, maybe.
if you can find it.
If you can find one.
Yeah. Maybe yours is still lying around somewhere.
I can have a look.
But what happens is Starsky and Hutch jump through lots of scenarios. They have a car chase. They run to an emergency, and when they get to the emergency,
what is the emergency?
It's a jumble sale.
Couldn't be any more British.
Couldn't be any more British. Couldn't be any more 70s. They're at a jumble sale.
So they're taking an American program and putting it through the blender of English silly comedy, and it still works. It's still a really fun page. It's still funny, and I always liked A Krazy Look at TV. And what I think the comic does overall, it does not talk down to the audience.
No.
And I think I realised that at the time. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I just appreciated it in some way. Similarly to Tiswell's on television, that didn't talk down to the audience either. It was like I didn't know what I was seeing or what I was reading or why I liked it. But looking back, that was one of the reasons. And another thing that happened around this time was I used to like Crackerjack, which was very slapsticky. And it was presented by...
Oh, sorry. Crackerjack!
That was far too late. But it had people like Peter Glaze in it. It went on for years, Crackerjack, didn't it?
Crackerjack!
20 years or more this programme went on for. And
which programme was that?
You know the one I mean. But the thing was, I used to really like that. And then one day I came home from school and Peter Glaze was no longer in that programme.
Crackerjack?
Yeah. Crackerjack! Now you've got me doing it. It was no longer Peter Glaze, it was no longer Ed Stewart and all the people that I really liked. It was now the Crankies and Stu Francis.
Oh, I Could Crush a Grape.
And I just remember thinking, what is this? This is not the programme I used to like. And I remember the Stu Francis programme, to me, used to talk down to the audience. And I just thought, what's gone wrong?
I've forgotten about that. That was awful, wasn't it, when that happened? That was terrible.
It really talked down to you. Whereas the Ed Stewart one was a lot more, I don't know, it just felt more like they'd put some thought into it or something. But anyway, so comparison with Krazy, I think Krazy never talked down to you. It treated you like an intelligent kid. And that's why it still sort of works now. End of rant. Meanwhile, back at the comic. Anyway, now we come to...
The Krazy Gang.
So let's look at the Krazy Gang.
Let's look at the Krazy Gang. So who are the members of the Krazy Gang, John?
There's Ed, who's a small child who appears to be an editor of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
His parrot, Blue.
Who's green.
A green parrot has joined this gang. Presumably most animals can join if they wish. I don't know how.
So.
But then we've got Liz, who watches television a lot. That's her character.
And she's a girl.
She is, yes. You've got Sporty, who is quite sporty.
He's sporty. And Sporty, I think rather wonderfully in Krazy Comic, Sporty is black. There were not many black characters in British comics at this time, but he's there. He's represented in this comic.
And you've got Brainy, who is Brainy.
Oh, I see. How would you know that?
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember that.
Okay.
He was such a strong character. And Cheeky's in it, the star of the comic. And then we come to the final member of the Krazy Gang.
Yes, what is the name of the final member of the Krazy Gang?
Freaky.
And why do you think he's called Freaky?
Is it because he's an alien that flies around who's got 10 eyes and enormous teeth and a tie?
That's probably it, isn't it, really?
It could be something to do with that.
Bit of nominative determinism going on there, isn't there?
So you've got a load of kids, a parrot and an alien.
And I think the thing is, a terrifying alien. This is not a cuddly alien at all, is he?
Not at all.
I've never seen anything that... I mean, Freaky looks a little bit like a flying saucer.
I'll give you that.
But it's a living flying saucer. It's not dissimilar to the Blitzspear in Nemesis, which was a living creature that was also a spaceship. Nemesis, which was drawn by Kevin O'Neill, the only person who was banned entirely by the Comics Code Authority of America.
Why?
Because it was too terrifying and weird. He drew a character that was 100 times less terrifying than Freaky from the Krazy Gang. It was just... It makes the knit stitcher presence look pleasant and adorable. He's so frightening.
Yeah. But it sticks in the mind, that's the thing.
He sticks in the back of your mind where the nightmares live, yes.
I remember as a kid just thinking, oh yeah, it's an alien, fine. And it's quite a fun little story. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it's nicely done, I think we can say.
It's one of these stories that I think there are a few stories. I think we were talking about Doug Turpin earlier. The stories in this comic that could have been in a normal comic.
Yeah, they're quite conventional.
Yeah.
Apart from the blooming Freaky character.
Apart from the Freaky character, which takes them out of it.
Which is peculiar. But it's not a bad little story. And then they appear again in this next feature called News Pound, and it says, you can win £1.
Not £2.
£1.
You have to draw it properly and be John Dredge to get £2.
If we print your zany news item, and so there's some zany news items, and each one is assigned to a member of the Krazy Gang, apart from Freaky, who we can't have him as part of this feature, I'm sorry.
That would be too upsetting.
To call me old-fashioned, we can't have him there.
But these are two Ronnie gags, aren't they?
These are like news-type, silly news gags, like thieves who stole 2 circus elephants were charged by the police today. The elephants then charged the police. That's the sort of standard of humour we had in the... But that's because the readers wrote in.
Can you do a two Ronnie's voice?
I can't really.
Oh,
no.
that's a shame. That would be great for him to do it.
No, I don't think I can. Can I do it two Ronnie's voice? No. Oh, good heavens. No, I can't really.
You can't.
But talking of people that sometimes impersonate people and sometimes don't, let's move on to Mickey Mimic.
Mickey Mimic.
Because it says here he can impersonate anybody. Unlike myself, he can apparently impersonate anybody. Let's put him to the test.
Let's put him to the test. So what happens in Mickey Mimic, I think, is in this storyline, his cousin turns up, who's called Ricky Mimic. So the fact that these two cousins have the same name is emblematic of the lack of imagination that has gone into this story. Because this story, spoilers, is rubbish.
I mean, you say that.
Yeah, I did just say that. Yes, we've got it on tape.
But let's look closely at this. Mickey Mimic, so you've got his cousin turning up. They're going to have a game of golf, as you would as a 7-year-old child.
Just what we all did. We all enjoyed a round of golf, didn't we?
But then suddenly another golfer comes on and says, push off, mate, I'm doing it. You can't do it. So then they think, oh, mutter, we're going to impersonate people to get rid of him. That's the ideal solution.
Because Mickey Mimic, he can impersonate anybody. That's what he can do.
Let's use his special power.
And who does he impersonate first? What kid-friendly, jolly character is he going to bring onto the stage here?
It's only the incredibly recognisable Tony Jacklin.
And how do we know he's called Tony? How do we know he's being Tony Jacklin?
Because the golfer says, look, it's Tony Jacklin. And the thing is, he impersonates him by putting a mask on that resembles Tony Jacklin in an uncanny manner.
And then his cousin then comes on, and he aims to sing, boys, it's the name of the game. Blah, blah.
But he's impersonating somebody. Can you guess who it is?
From that impersonation? Probably
no.
not.
But thankfully, the golfer says, wow, it's Bruce Forsyth.
But this is why I wanted to have a look at this particular strip, because we've talked about Krazy, and we talked about Tiswas, and we've talked about Crackerjack. And going, oh, wasn't there so much great, hilarious, fun content in the 70s? And this strip reminds us that there was a lot of rubbish as well, because it really reminded me of Little and Large. And when Eddie Large would come on, and Sid Little would say, go away, Eddie, I'm trying to do a song, and Eddie would say, oh, dirty dog here. and he would introduce all his personations with the name of the character he was pretending to be, because that was the only way you would know who it was.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And then at the end of the story, Ricky and Mickey Mimic
team up.
They team up to get rid of this silly golfer, and they team up by impersonating Starsky and Hutch. And yet again, they come on, they've got all these masks in some trunk that they carry around for just such an occasion. They therefore look remarkably like Starsky and Hutch, and they say, "Beat it, Buster, wise guy. We're playing golf here," and off he goes into the distance, and they laugh at their successful impersonation prank.
So 2 things there. Firstly, they're tiny. These are the size of children, so this man must think that Bruce Forsyth and Tony Jacklin are tiny people.
Yeah, I mean, if they were impersonating Prince, we could understand.
That would work. That would be fun. Or Jimmy Cranky.
Or Ronnie Corbett.
Any of these characters would work.
Bruce Forsyth? No.
Not so much. And secondly, does this man think that Starsky and Hutch are real? Surely.
I'm afraid he does.
That would have been a giveaway, wouldn't it? Because hang on a minute. There's no such character as Starsky and or Hutch.
Yes, I can see where it all falls down.
It does all fall down. I did not enjoy this one. That was not what I enjoyed.
Mickey Mimic, let us pass on from you. But look what we come to now.
From the ridiculous
to the sublime.
And also ridiculous.
And also ridiculous, yeah.
So we're looking at Birdman and Chicken.
The Boy Blunder. So this was a parody of Batman and Robin that was on television at the time, the Adam West version.
It was on regular repeats. I looked it up and everything.
I didn't used to think that. I didn't realise that was the TV show was meant to be funny. I didn't realise that. As a 7-year-old, I just thought it was a fun adventure show. And I was obsessed with it.
Mm.
You know, I had the Batmobile, like most kids at the time. I had a bat mask, I had a cape. I even had someone called Robin that used to come around occasionally. But, you know, it was a massive deal. It was Batmania. It really was a huge deal. So Birdman and Chicken was a parody of that. And it was, to me, at the time, it was a really funny parody. I used to love the artwork.
The artwork's called Trevor Metcalf.
Trevor Metcalf. I used to try and draw Birdman quite a lot. I can still sort of do it. I used to just trace it because I was so fascinated by the artwork. There were very few pictures of Birdman full on. Most of the time he was drawn from the side, and I was always fascinated by what they were wearing, these bizarre wings that were hanging off their arms and these peculiar chicken-like legs they had.
Because it's a proper design though, isn't it? Because it's not a Batman costume. The wings are attached to his arms. It's very different. It's a gorgeous design. It just looks great, doesn't it? But it goes beyond. It's not just. I think the idea of it comes to be this is a parody of a Batman story on the telly, and they do things like what's he say?
Well, they've got villains like the Giggler. That was one of them.
Yeah.
And they've got these people here. Is it Doctor somebody? Dr. Demon and Nurse Nasty. Yeah. So they had villains that maybe sounded a bit like the Batman villains, but they were quite different.
And like Robin says things like hapless half-winches. Sorry.
Hawfinches, I think you'll find.
Hapless hawfinches, that's the word. And so or horrific herons, trapped. And they use Batman-ish things like that. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? It's a gorgeous thing.
I mean, Birdman and Chicken is my favourite comic strip. It just had a massive impact on me at the time. It was funny superheroes. It was probably the first time I'd ever seen that, being 7 years old. Because I bought the recent collection of Birdman and Chicken.
Yeah, me too.
I still really loved it. I loved it. It's been really nicely collected if you want to see it. To me, it's still funny. It's still very readable. But this issue, I actually didn't think the story was that good. But this story, to me, lacks something. It's not that funny. It's okay. But I wonder if they had a different writer this week or something. This is not an inspired example of Birdman and Chicken. There are loads that are absolutely brilliant. It's like that Banana Man we reviewed the other week. There are loads of brilliant Banana Man strips, but unlike
Banana Man, it does end with their saying like find out more next week, doesn't it? So we're not left hanging going, what was that all about?
Yeah, this is a big obvious cliffhanger, and it says, will Dr. Demon deprive the dynamic duo of their disguises? See there again, an obvious reference to Batman and Robin. Find out next week. So another slight problem is it's all in red ink again.
It is.
I don't think that works on this page.
No, with Pongo Snodgrass, that's weird. That was good, but because this reads like it's. I think with this one, this is kind of like a standard comic story, but a great one. And it's both funny and it is kind of an adventure story because it does have a cliffhanger. They do get into trouble and they do find their way out of trouble as these stories go on. So it's a classic Birdman and Chicken.
Yeah, and he wasn't very good at being a superhero, but nevertheless that didn't stop him. You know? So there was fun characters and things like that in it, and I still really like it. As I say, the collection's fun.
An inspiration for both of us. These are two people who aren't very good at doing a thing.
Yeah, and
doing a thing. Five episodes in.
Yeah, so you can see the influence there quite clearly.
Quite clear.
But yeah, Birdman and Chicken, do
Fantastic.
have a look at it if you get a chance. It's a very fun story. Then we've got something called It's a Crazy World, which is photographs of silly things. So again, they're playing with the format of the comic.
Are you saying, John, that maybe the production of culture approach here tells us that the ability to print photographs means they have printed photographs?
Is that what I was saying?
I think that's what you were saying.
I'll have to consult you later. But I always liked silly photographs.
It's quite mad. It's
a bit mad. It's a bit mad magazine. But let's move on to the 12.5p Bitonic Boy.
Another great classic of these comics.
So this is a parody of the $6 Million Man. He's not bionic, he's bitonic, because he bought some tonic
for 12.5p
from this mad professor, and every time he drinks that, or not, maybe he drunk it once and then changed into this Bitonic Boy.
And I think my favourite joke in this is that in the Bionic Man he's called Steve Austin, and in this he's called Steve Ford, because for younger listeners, what are you listening to this for? But for younger listeners, an Austin Allegro was a kind of car, as was a Ford Cortina or similar.
I've only just spotted that reference. This is
I'm showing
40 years ago.
I'm showing off because I only spotted it last week when I was reading this for the first time.
You can see the subtlety involved in a lot of this. But yeah, this is a fairly standard story about a really strong bionic or bitonic boy. Yeah, I used to quite look forward to reading that because it was a superhero sort of thing. And I used to like the Bionic Man.
Yeah,
Bionic Man was massive, like Batman. Loads of toys available, so they were going to parody it here.
Yeah, and you're right on you. It is another adventure story. It is like Birdman and Chicken, drawn by where has it gone? Robert Nixon. And again, it looks wonderful, doesn't it? It
looks really good,
zingy. It's brilliant,
and kids could relate to it because it's a superhero kid sort of thing. 12.5p. And then we end with the letters page with some fairly not very interesting letters from readers.
But that is not the end of this comic, is it? There's still one of the great high points of this comic to come.
And it is the Krazy Comic disguise.
So do you want to explain the Krazy Comic disguise? How does it work?
Well, yeah, on the back cover, they've used this in a really creative way, which is sort of reflects the whole comic. Creative, imaginative and fun. So every week they had a back cover disguise. So, for example, it could be disguised as something that you should be reading if you're in a classroom.
Or sometimes there was one where it was a Christmas cracker. You could roll the comic up
and pretend it was a Christmas cracker for your friends.
Yeah. Or I've got one where it's a half filled in colour by numbers picture. So you can pretend you're not reading a comic, you're doing something else.
Or it might be a really worthy book or something like War and Peace.
Yeah.
So if you're in the library, the school library, it looks like you're reading War and Peace and not this funny comic.
But that's not what's on this one, is it?
Well, this is a bit of a... I'm not sure about this Krazy Comic disguise. Let me read what it says. This week's Krazy Comic disguise will give your dad a surprise. When he's decorating or doing a bit of woodwork, replace his real sandpaper sheet with our disguise. Just watch his face as he slaves away trying to get a smooth surface with it.
Because the back of the comic is a sheet of sandpaper. It's a sheet of sandpaper, and it looks like a piece of sandpaper because it goes right to the edges. It's basically a photograph, a colour photograph, some sandpaper, I think. It looks amazing. It looks like
good.
Sandpaper.
And so you give it to Dad and go, hey, Dad, try this for sandpaper. And then, oh my goodness me, it turned out to be a comic. What hijinks and fun and laughs that is. But that was something that used to make it stand out for me, the back cover disguise. You know, using the back cover for something like that, to me, was good fun and a bit of a laugh.
Oh, I think it's wonderful, this.
And I think on the April Fool edition, when you turn it to the back cover, it's got the front cover on it upside down. Just little touches like that are quite amusing.
I think it's a fitting end to the comic, isn't it? It's creative It's good. It looks great. It's creative. It's fun.
It's full of invention.
And I don't think I'm going beyond my remit here to speak for both of us and say we love this comic, didn't we?
Yeah. So what are our number 1 and 2 favourite things out of the comic?
I mean, it's hard to. I mean, with Nutty, it was hard to choose.
It was hard to choose, yeah, because there were hardly anything we liked in it.
Well, what is your absolute favourite? What did you think was the favourite?
I mean, normally I would have to say Birdman and Chicken, because those are my favourite characters.
Yeah.
But in this particular issue, I'd have to say my favourite bit is the crazy shaded drawing.
I will agree with you there.
That is my favourite bit of the whole comic.
I think my second most favourite bit is the sandpaper. I just think it's so hilarious. The massive balls of the editorial staff to go, we're going to put out a comic and the back page will look like a sheet of sandpaper. I just think that's so wonderful and hilarious.
Yeah. But yeah, it was every page, there was something worthwhile on every page.
Oh,
I
there
think.
was.
My second favourite thing, I think Pongo Longa Pongo.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it?
Because the character is so great and the material is really funny. So it's just sort of, that would be my second favourite.
I think that's a good one. It just makes me feel a bit sad, Paolo goes, because I think hope Pongo's all right. I hope he got through
A
this.
strangely self-possessed character, but he's like the villain almost of the crazy gang.
Yeah.
But we like him. We like the villains, don't we?
Well, we love him. I hope his world got better for him.
A lot of the time, the heroes aren't very interesting. The villains are the ones that have got all the character. But I mean, Birdman and Chicken aren't like that. They're brilliant characters. They're the good guys. They're so stupid. That's why they're funny.
Often the way in superhero comics, John, but alas, we do not have time to get into that.
No, we don't.
If you'd like to read my entire PhD about that, send us an email at this address.
DREDGEHIBBETT@gmail.com.
And the thing I wasn't too keen on, I must admit.
I don't know what that could be, John. I've got no way of knowing what you're going to say here.
I might surprise you here. It's Carol and her knit stitcher from Palatoy. Not a big fan. Not a big fan.
Did you not? That didn't
I
come
wasn't a
across.
big fan of
Didn't
that.
come across.
No.
I quite enjoyed it because I found it quite funny how the parents looked. They were smiling with their mouths, but not their eyes. It's a lovely comic. You can understand why it's lasted so long in the memory. But there were other ones that we'll talk about later, I'm sure, that didn't so much. But so many characters, we loved it.
Yeah, it was full of fun. Full of fun.
Well, all that remains, I think, then, is for me to present you with next week's comic.
Oh.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Johnny's looking intrigued.
It's not even my birthday.
There you go. It's TV comic.
Wow.
TV
look at that.
comic I'm going to look at next
From
time.
1970, that was when I was born.
It was when I was born.
Oh, this looks promising. Laugh with Pink Panther on page 7. I'll be the judge of that.
So, to find out what John and I think of TV comic, please join us next time. To do that, please like and subscribe. We're on all each and every single podcast channel you can think of. We're on all of them now.
Yeah.
So no excuses.
And join us again next time for another fun-filled edition of the Funny Comics Fan Club.
See ya!
Goodbye.